Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are really glad you're here with us today because we are about to tackle a story that feels, honestly, like it was written by a Hollywood screenwriter.
It really does.
I mean, it has every single element of a blockbuster drama.
Yeah.
You have a solitary genius working in secret, a forbidden relationship, a race against a terminal illness, and this David versus Goliath battle against the most powerful corporations on Earth.
It sounds like fiction, doesn't it? And usually when we sit down to talk about scientific revolutions, the mental image is, well, it's very specific.
Right.
You think of laboratories, bubbling beakers, massive teams of men in white coats, maybe the Manhattan Project. It's loud, it's industrial, it's expensive.
Yeah, it's big science.
Exactly. But the revolution we are deep diving into today didn't start in a lab. It didn't start with a government grant. It started with a fountain pen, a pad of paper, and a woman sitting by a window watching birds in her backyard.
We are talking, of course, about Rachel Carson.
Yeah.
Now, I think most people listening have a thumbnail sketch of who she is. You know the name.
Mm-hmm.
You know she wrote Silent Spring. You probably know she's considered the patron saint of the modern environmental movement. But when we actually opened up the source material for this, the biographies, the personal letters, the court transcripts, that thumbnail sketch just felt completely inadequate.
It misses the tension. And
Yeah.
that is really the word that defined her life. Tension.
That's a great word for it.
On one side, you have Rachel Carson, the person, an intensely private, soft-spoken marine biologist who loved cats and tide pools. She was an introvert in the truest sense. I mean, she didn't want to be famous.
No.
She just wanted to be left alone to write about the ocean.
And on the other side,
On the other side, she becomes this lightning rod. She becomes the central figure in one of the most vicious, high-stakes public controversies of the 20th century. She gets dragged into the political arena, attacked by chemical giants, and smeared by politicians.
it's the ultimate underdog story.
Yeah.
But the underdog here is a middle-aged woman hiding the fact that she's dying of cancer, while taking on the combined might of the chemical industry and the United States Department of Agriculture.
It's incredible. And our mission for this deep dive isn't just to recount the dates and facts. We want to uncover how she did it.
Right.
Because looking at the research, this isn't just a science story, it's a communication story. It's about a writer who realized that raw data by itself doesn't change the world. She realized she had to use poetry, literally, a lyrical, poetic style of writing, to force the public to look at hard, ugly science.
That is such a key insight to start with, the idea that facts aren't enough.
Not at all.
You have to wrap the facts in a narrative that makes people feel something.
That was her superpower, and you have to remember the context. She was challenging the dominant religion of the 1950s, which was the idea that science equals progress.
Oh yeah, the better living through chemistry era. I've seen the ads.
Exactly. The post-WWIR mindset was that humans had finally conquered nature. If you could synthesize a chemical to kill a bug, that was inherently good. It was progress. It was patriotic.
And then she comes along.
Carson was the first voice to step up, clear her throat, and say, wait a minute. What are the unintended consequences of this dominion over nature?
So let's unpack this life. Because she didn't just burst onto the scene in 1962 with Silent Spring out of nowhere. She had an entire career, a whole life, and a very specific worldview that led her to that moment.
To understand that worldview, we have to go back to the beginning. Springdale, Pennsylvania, 1907.
Okay, so paint the picture for us. This wasn't a bustling city life, I take it?
No, quite the opposite. The source material describes a 65-acre farm, and by all accounts, Rachel was a solitary child.
The word loner pops up a lot in the biographies we read, but I don't get the sense it was a sad, lonely existence.
Not at all. It was an observant existence. She wasn't lonely. She was busy. She spent her time exploring the woods, the fields, looking at the river. She was absorbing the natural world directly, without filters.
And she was a huge reader.
An avid reader. We see references to her devouring St. Nicholas magazine, the stories of Beatrix Potter, and then later really heavy literary hitters like Melville and Conrad.
And she wasn't just reading, she was writing. She was publishing stories by age 10.
Yeah.
Which frankly makes me feel very unproductive about my own childhood.
It is impressive. But here's the aha moment that I love in her early biography. She heads off to Pennsylvania College for Women, which is now Chatham University. And she goes there with a very specific plan.
That's the plan.
She is going to study English. She wants to be a writer. That is her identity.
So the plan is set, English major, future author. But then in January 1928, she pulls a maneuver that was, well, Shocking for the time.
She switches her major
From English,
to biology.
we have to pause on that for a second. In 1928, for a woman to pivot from the acceptable path of English literature or teaching into the hard sciences, that must have been seen as a bizarre move.
It was incredibly rare. It was bold. Her professors were likely confused, to say the least. But I think it's a mistake to view it as a total switch or a rejection of writing.
You don't think she was choosing one over the other?
No, I think she merged them. She brought the observation skills, the vocabulary, and the narrative structure of a writer to the study of biology.
That fusion is the key, isn't it? That's what made her so dangerous to the industry later on.
Absolutely.
She could understand the raw data in the lab reports, and she could explain it in a way that your grandmother could understand and care about.
Precisely. She bridged the gap. But, like so many people in that era, her academic dreams hit a massive wall called the Great Depression.
Yeah, the financial reality detailed in the sources is grim. It's the classic story of potential meeting hardship.
It is. Her father dies suddenly in 1935. And suddenly, Rachel isn't just a student anymore.
She becomes the primary breadwinner.
She becomes the head of the household. She has to leave her doctoral studies at Johns Hopkins, which was a huge sacrifice, because she literally needed a paycheck to keep a roof over her family's head. She was supporting her mother, and eventually she would support her nieces as well.
So she couldn't afford to be an academic theorist in an ivory tower. She needed cash.
She needed a job. So she takes a position with the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries, and this is where that unique blend of skills, the writer and the scientist, finally found its home.
Okay, this is honestly my favorite part of her resume. She is a government bureaucrat.
She is.
And what is her actual job description? Writing radio scripts.
The series was called Romance Under the Waters.
Romance Under the Waters. You can't make this stuff up. It sounds like a bad soap opera for fish.
Right. Will the salmon return to the shad? Tune in next week.
Exactly.
But it sounds funny now, but it was a series project. It was a series of 52 7-minute broadcasts. The government's goal was just to generate public interest in fish biology and the work of the Bureau.
And I'm guessing that was a tough sell.
Well, previous writers had tried to do this kind of thing and failed miserably. It was dry, boring, bureaucratic copy.
The kind of stuff that makes you change the dial immediately.
Instantly. But Carson, she made it fascinating. She treated the life cycle of the eel or the shad with the same dramatic weight as a human biography. She made people care about what was happening underwater.
That is the training ground right there. If you can make a 1930s radio audience sit still and listen to a story about fish biology for 7 minutes, you are learning how to hook an audience.
You are learning how to translate complex science for everyone, and this leads to a pivotal moment in her career. Her supervisor at the Bureau asks her to write an introduction for a public brochure.
A pamphlet.
Just a standard government pamphlet on fisheries. She turns something in, and her boss reads it, puts it down, and basically says, "Rachel, I can't use this."
And she must have been crushed.
For a second, maybe, but he didn't say it because it was bad.
He said it because it was too good.
Exactly. He told her it was too literary, too poetic for a government brochure. He famously told her to send it to the Atlantic Monthly.
Which is incredible advice from a government supervisor.
It really is.
Usually just want you to file the paperwork and stay in your lane.
It was a gift. She takes his advice, she revises it, and it's published as an essay titled Undersea. And that was the spark. That essay caught the attention of Simon & Schuster, and that launched her literary career.
This brings us to what we call the Sea Trilogy era, because before she was the pesticide lady that everyone knows, she was the ocean lady.
She was. And this is a crucial period, the 1940s and 50s. Her first book, Under the Sea Wind, comes out in 1941. It gets great reviews for its lyrical quality, but
Terrible timing.
just the worst. Pearl Harbor happens right after it's published.
So the world wasn't really looking for poetic musings on shorebirds when the Pacific Fleet had just been attacked?
Not exactly. It sold poorly, she was discouraged, but she kept working at the Fish and Wildlife Service, eventually becoming chief editor of publications. But she kept writing on the side. And in 1951, she publishes The Sea Around Us.
And this wasn't just a hit. This was a cultural phenomenon. The numbers here are just staggering.
It really was. It stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for 86 weeks.
86 weeks. That is over a year and a half. That is Harry Potter levels of dominance.
It won the National Book Award, and more importantly for her, it gave her financial independence. For the first time, she could quit her government job, this was in 1952, and focus on writing full-time.
She finally gets to do what she loves.
Right. She bought a cottage in Maine, She was, by all metrics, a massive success.
Why do you think that book, at that time, resonated so much? It's 1951, the Cold War is heating up. Why did people want to read about the ocean?
That's a great question. I think it offered perspective. We were entering the atomic age, terrified of our own power, terrified of the bomb. Carson presented the ocean as this ancient, eternal force that was bigger than humanity.
Right, something we couldn't destroy.
Exactly. It was humbling, but also comforting. It reminded people that we are just a small part of a much larger system. It was an escape from the anxiety of the news cycle.
There is a funny anecdote in the notes here about Hollywood getting involved. Because when you have a bestseller that big, the movie studios come calling.
They do. A producer named Irwin Allen.
Wait, the master of disaster guy? From the Poseidon Adventure and the Towering Inferno?
The very same one. He produced a documentary based on the sea around us.
And Carson did not like it.
She hated it, loathed it. She called it a cross between Believe It or Not and a breezy travelogue. She found scientific errors in the script, but she had signed away the rights to control the content, so she had to just watch.
And the irony is?
The irony is that the documentary won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature in 1953.
You are kidding me. So she wins the National Book Award, the movie wins an Oscar, and she is just sitting there fuming because it's not scientifically accurate.
She was so embittered by the experience that she never sold film rights to her work again. It just shows her integrity. She wasn't in it for the fame. She was in it for the truth of the nature she was describing.
Speaking of the truth of her life, we have to talk about the personal side. Because for a long time, Carson was portrayed in the media as this sort of spinster aunt figure.
Right.
No husband, no kids,
Right.
although she did adopt her grandnephew later on. But the research shows there was a massive emotional anchor in her life.
Dorothy Freeman.
Right. Let's talk about Dorothy. Who was she?
They met in 1953 in Maine. Freeman was a summer neighbor and a huge fan of Carson's work, and this sparked a correspondence that lasted for the rest of Carson's life over 12 years.
The volume of letters is staggering. We're talking about 900 letters exchanged. And these aren't just, hey, how's the weather notes?
No, they are deeply intimate. In fact, they destroyed hundreds of letters shortly before Carson's death to guard their privacy, which tells you something about how they viewed them.
It does.
But the ones that survived, they are filled with these profound expressions of love.
I have a quote here from one of Freeman's letters that I want to read, just to give you a sense of the tone. I love you beyond expression. My love is boundless as the sea.
And Carson wrote back to her things like, but oh, darling, I want to be with you so terribly that it hurts. It's intense.
It's very intense. So how do biographers interpret this?
Well, they interpret it in different ways.
Yeah.
Some view it as a romantic lesbian relationship in the way we'd understand it today. Others describe it more as a Boston marriage, a term for a very deep, committed, but not necessarily sexual friendship between two women that was somewhat common in that era.
Does the label really matter?
You know, I think that's the right question to ask to a historian, maybe. But to the story of Rachel Carson's life, what matters is the function of the relationship. Dorothy Freeman provided the emotional scaffolding that allowed Carson to endure what was coming next.
She was her support system.
She was her safe harbor. Carson was about to face the most brutal attacks of her life, and Freeman was the one person Rachel could be completely vulnerable with.
And she needed that harbor.
Yeah.
Because we are moving into the next section now, the shift to Silent Spring.
Mm-hmm.
How does a woman writing bestsellers about the majesty of the ocean decide to pivot to pesticides? It seems like a hard left turn from romance under the waters.
It wasn't as sudden as it seems. Carson had actually noticed DDT as early as the mid-1940s. Remember, she was working for the government. She saw the reports on this miracle chemical that had been used in World War II to stop typhus and malaria.
Insect bomb.
They called it the insect bomb.
Yeah.
People really loved DDT back then. I've seen those old newsreels where trucks are just spraying neighborhoods and kids are running through the fog playing tag.
It was seen as a symbol of modernity, of cleanliness.
Exactly. It was a savior. But by 1957, things had changed. The USDA launched these massive eradication programs, one for the fire ant and one for the gypsy moth. And this involved aerial spraying of fuel oil and DDT mixed together directly over private land.
So planes just dumping chemicals over suburbs, bird sanctuaries, dairy farms.
All of it. And this is where the backlash starts. People didn't like being sprayed from airplanes without their consent.
I can imagine not.
No, they didn't. And this leads us to a crucial, often overlooked source for Silent Spring. A woman named Marjorie Spock.
Wait, Spock. Any relation to it?
The very same family. I believe she was the sister of Dr. Benjamin Spock, the famous pediatrician.
Wow, okay.
Marjorie Spock was an organic gardener on Long Island. Her land was sprayed. She and another woman named Mary T. Richards sued the government to stop the spraying.
And they lost the lawsuit.
They lost the suit, yes. But, and this is the key, they compiled a massive amount of evidence. Transcripts, expert testimony, data on bird deaths, soil contamination, all of it. Marjorie Spock sent all of this to Rachel Carson.
So this was the raw data, the proof.
It was a gold mine. Carson called it exactly that, a gold mine of information.
Hmm.
She didn't have to go out and catch the dying birds herself. The evidence was brought to her doorstep.
And from this, she develops the central argument of silent spring. And she introduces a new term that I think is so powerful: biocides.
Yes, that was a rhetorical masterstroke. She argued that calling them insecticides was a semantic lie. They didn't just kill insects, they killed everything. Birds, fish, helpful insects like bees, and potentially harmed humans.
So biocide, killer of life.
Killer of life. She was reframing the language, forcing people to see the bigger picture.
And she also introduced the idea of resistance. This is the part that I think makes her argument so logical, even to someone who loves technology. It wasn't just chemicals are bad, it was chemicals are ineffective.
Right. She leaned on Darwin. She understood evolution. She explained that if you spray a field, you might kill 99% of the insects, but the 1% that survive, they're the ones with a natural genetic immunity.
And they're the only ones left to breed.
Exactly. They breed. And suddenly you have a population of superbugs that the chemical can't kill, so you spray more, or you spray something stronger. It's a chemical arms race that we can't win.
It's the treadmill of pesticide use. Now, I want to clarify something because I think this is a huge misconception that critics used then and people still get wrong today. Did Rachel Carson want to ban all pesticides?
No, absolutely not. And she was very clear about that in the book, though her critics conveniently ignored it.
So what was she advocating for?
She argued for biotic approaches, using natural enemies, biological controls, but she acknowledged that sometimes chemicals were necessary. Her argument was spray as little as possible, only when necessary, and know what the consequences are. She wasn't saying never, she was saying be careful. She was advocating for nuance in a world that wanted absolutes.
But writing this book wasn't just an intellectual challenge for her. This brings us to the most heartbreaking part of the story, Section 5, writing through agony.
The timeline here is devastating. While she's researching environmental cancer carcinogens in the environment, she discovers she has breast cancer.
Talk about a cruel irony. Investigating what causes cancer while dying from it.
It is profound. In 1960, she finds cysts. She has a mastectomy. But the cancer had already metastasized. And remember, this is the early 60s. The treatments were brutal. Radiation burns. She developed a duodenal ulcer. She had heart issues. She was often bedridden while writing the final chapters of Silent Spring.
And she kept it a secret. She didn't tell the public. Why?
She had to. She was a woman taking on the male-dominated chemical industry. She knew that if they found out she had cancer, they would use it against her.
How so? What would they say?
They would say she was bitter. They would say she was biased because she was dying. They would say she was hysterical, emotional. She needed the book to stand on its scientific merits, not be dismissed as the rantings of a dying woman.
So she suffered in silence.
She did. She was literally racing death to finish the manuscript.
That is an incredible amount of discipline and courage. And speaking of the book, let's talk about the title. It wasn't always going to be called Silent Spring.
No, the working title was The Control of Nature.
Which is a strong title, honestly. It attacks the philosophy directly.
It is, but it's a bit academic. It sounds like a dissertation. Silent Spring was originally just the title of the chapter on birds, the idea that you wake up one spring morning and there is no birdsong because the robins are all dead.
Jilly.
Her literary agent, Marie Rodell, suggested using it for the whole book.
And it was a right call. The control of nature appeals to the brain. Silent Spring appeals to the gut. It sounds like a horror story. It's a metaphor for a dead world.
It evokes an emotional response immediately, and that's what she needed. She needed to scare people into paying attention.
So the book comes out in 1962, and the explosion happens. Section 6, the backlash. We knew the chemical industry wasn't going to take this lying down.
Not taking it lying down is the understatement of the century. They went to total war. Companies like Velsicol and DuPont threatened legal action against her publisher, Houghton Mifflin, and The New Yorker, which serialized the book.
They tried to stop it from even being printed.
They did. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on PR campaigns to discredit her.
And when they couldn't stop the printing, They went after her personally.
Hmm.
The insults listed in the source material are, well, they're exactly what you'd expect from 1960s corporate America dealing with a powerful woman.
They were vicious and so clearly gendered. They called her a bird and bunny lover. They called her a priestess of nature.
My favorite is a woman out of control.
Yes. That one specifically targets the gender norms of the time. A woman is supposed to be composed, domestic. By challenging industry, she was out of control. But the most ridiculous and dangerous slur came from the political arena.
The communist thing.
Right. Former Secretary of Agriculture Ezra Taft Benson reportedly wrote a letter to former President Eisenhower. He couldn't understand why a woman who was attractive and intelligent wasn't married. So his conclusion was,
She must be a communist.
she must be a communist.
The logic there is breathtaking. She's single, so she must be a red.
It reflects the paranoia of the Cold War era. Anything that challenged the American capitalist system, and the chemical industry was a huge part of that system, was seen as potentially subversive, maybe even part of a plot to weaken America's food supply.
But the attacks didn't work. In fact, they kind of backfired.
They did. The controversy just made more people buy the book. Everyone wanted to read the book that big business didn't want them to see. But the real turning point was television, specifically a CBS Reports special in 1963.
This is the visual showdown. You have millions of people watching this. On one side, you have the industry scientist, a Dr. Robert White Stevens.
And he fell right into the trap. He appeared on camera in a white lab coat, looking very intense, very loud, wild-eyed. He made statements like, "If we follow the teachings of Miss Carson, we will return to the Dark Ages, and insects will inherit the earth."
He was screaming doom and gloom. He looked like the stereotype of a mad scientist.
He really did. And then they cut to Rachel Carson.
And what did people see?
They saw a calm, rational, polite woman sitting in her study. She spoke slowly. She was measured. She didn't look like a communist fanatic. She looked like the voice of reason. The visual contrast just destroyed the industry's argument that she was hysterical.
It was a PR disaster for them. And it wasn't just the public watching. President Kennedy was watching.
Yes. JFK had already read the book, or at least the serialization in the New Yorker. He established a science advisory committee to investigate the claims in Silent Spring, and when their report came out, it largely backed her up.
That was the vindication.
Total vindication. The highest office in the land said she's right and the industry is wrong.
But she didn't have much time to enjoy that victory.
No. She died in April 1964. She was only 56 years old. Her cancer and the treatments had just weakened her heart too much.
And this leads to a story about her death that I had never heard before, and it's honestly incredibly sad. The dispute over her ashes.
It is tragic. Carson had been very clear in her will. She wanted to be buried in Maine, overlooking the ocean. That was her spiritual home. It's where she met Dorothy Freeman. It's where she wrote The Sea Around Us.
But her brother, Robert Carson.
Robert insisted she be buried in Maryland beside their mother. And legally, he had the power as the executor. So against her wishes, a funeral was held in Maryland. It seems he just couldn't understand her connection to Maine.
But that's not the end of it, is it?
No. This is where Dorothy Freeman comes in again one last time. A compromise was secretly reached. Dorothy Freeman took half of Rachel's ashes, and in the summer of 1964, she took them to Maine. She went to the rocky shores of Sheepscot Bay, where they had spent so many hours together, and she scattered them into the ocean.
So in the end, she got her wish, or at least half of her did. It's a poetic ending for the woman who wrote The Sea Around Us.
It is, and it speaks to the loyalty of that friendship. Dorothy made sure Rachel returned to the sea she loved so much.
So let's zoom out. What is the legacy here? Obviously, we have the EPA. That's a direct line.
That's the most direct policy line. Silent Spring led to the nationwide ban on DDT for agricultural use, and it spurred the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency in 1970. Before that, pesticide regulation was done by the USDA, the same people whose job was to promote agriculture.
Right.
Carson pointed out that conflict of interest. She argued, you can't have the fox guarding the henhouse.
But it's more than just an agency. It's a cultural shift, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. She is considered the mother of the modern grassroots environmental movement. Before Carson, conservation was mostly about managing resources for human use, like making sure there are enough ducks for hunters or enough timber for loggers.
Is utilitarian.
Exactly. After Carson, environmentalism became about ecology, the idea that everything is connected, that if you poison the bug, you poison the bird, and you poison the human. She shifted the focus from resource management to survival.
And she also influenced ecofeminism, which is fascinating.
She did. By challenging the man-over-nature dominance hierarchy, she opened the door for questioning other hierarchies. She showed that the conquest of nature was a dangerous, arrogant idea. She proposed a relationship of stewardship rather than domination.
And Jimmy Carter posthumously awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
He did. It's amazing to think about that shy woman writing letters to her friend in Maine, terrified that her wig would slip and reveal her cancer treatment during a TV interview, yet she managed to change the entire trajectory of the 20th century.
She proved that a single voice, if the truth is on its side and the writing is clear enough, can actually stop a juggernaut. She didn't have money, she didn't have political power, but she had the words.
She really did.
So here is where it gets really interesting for me, and this is the thought I want to leave our listeners with. Rachel Carson warned us about the contamination of man's total environment. She warned us about the arrogance of thinking we can control nature without consequences.
Yeah, that was her core message, that we're a part of nature, not above it.
If Rachel Carson were alive today, looking at microplastics in the ocean, looking at forever chemicals like PFAS in our rainwater, looking at climate change, would she look at us and say, "Good job, you banned DDT"? Or would she say that we missed the point entirely?
That is the uncomfortable question, isn't it? We banned the specific chemical she wrote about, but did we change the mindset?
That's it.
We are still in an arms race with nature. We are still synthesizing new compounds faster than we can test their long-term effects. We are still operating under the assumption that we can engineer our way out of biological reality.
Exactly. It feels like we treated the symptom DDT, but maybe we haven't cured the disease, which is that belief that we are the masters of the earth, rather than just one small, very vulnerable part of it.
It's a sobering thought. But if her life teaches us anything, it's that we have the capacity to wake up. We just need to listen to the birds, or the lack of them.
Well said. That's it for this deep dive into the life and legacy of Rachel Carson, a woman who merged science and poetry to save the world even as she was leaving it. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.
Goodbye, everyone.